Hello mate and welcome back. Now that we've learned how to manipulate objects in our scene, it's about time we learned how to pose our character. So there's several ways that we can do this, and there are varying levels of complexity, and each one has its pitfalls and its possibilities. The first way is simply to click on a bone in the scene and move it around using the widget tool, which will allow you to move objects like this, and you can pose like that. And as you can see, it's not perfect. It has its possibilities, but it also has a lot of problems in that it's very difficult to move something in 3 dimensions using a mouse in a 2-dimensional scene like this. There's a lot of room for error here. So we can do a undo translate, and we can move these bits back to where they belong, and we're back to the base pose. Now, there is a way of restoring all of the joints in a pose, and that's by when you have a bone or the character selected. So let's go back to our main character here. You can see that there's this little man icon next to the widget, and if you click on that, there's an option to restore figure pose. Word of caution, if you have a lot of poses in your database, you will find that it can take any length of time up to, so far the longest it's ever taken me to do this is about 20 minutes. So in reality, it's often just quicker to delete the character and start from scratch, because it's quicker to load a new character into the scene than it is to restore the figure pose of the one that you've currently got. As crazy as that is, unfortunately that's what the Daz Productions team have decided is acceptable in this case. Something to bear in mind if you're going to use that. The other alternative way of moving your pose is to use Power Pose, which is a pane that you can access by going into the windows, the panes and tabs, and they'll appear down there. And this allows you to control all of the joints in the body very simply. So let's just move this over to one side without docking it. And as you can see, you can select a joint and you can rotate it. And you can use the instructions here, controls for twist, bend, side to side, and bend. And that will allow you to control different aspects of the character's body. And if you go into the face using this one, you can then control the eyeballs, you can control different parts of the face using these click and drag tools. And if you go into there, you've got really fine control over pretty much every muscle in the character's face. So you can get really in depth and make these poses really fine. This is a great way of designing your own facial expressions, and that is something that I definitely encourage you all to do, because the expressions that you're going to buy from the Daz Studio store are for very specific characters, which means that when you load them into your custom characters, they're going to look really weird. Very rarely will they actually look as intended in the demo material that you see before you buy the poses. So that's the other way that you can do posing. And then probably the way that I do it more than anything else is I select a bone here, and then in the parameters tab, you've got the option to bend, twist, and do side to side on those as well. And there are limits as to how far you can go, just to make sure that you don't end up making it look like its joints are made out of jelly or something like that. So another very useful way of posing. It does take a long time, and I certainly wouldn't construct a whole pose using this method. This is more for fine tuning. A lot of poses that you're going to buy from the storefront or from other sources, again, are going to be for very specific models, which means that when you pose them, you're going to find that the joints don't quite sit right. The hands are going to clip into the body if they're touching their hips or something like that, because the poses were designed for a character with different body proportions. What Daz Studio is actually saving is these values for every single bone and joint in the body. So if I bend that to there, Daz Studio is going to save the 3 values here and then do the same thing for every subsequent bone. So it's not seeing whether or not the skin geo shell is actually clipping on itself or not. All it's seeing is the positions of the bones. So that's something to bear in mind when you're using store-bought poses. The ability to manipulate the bones in very fine detail, and you can use the the nudge tool if you want to move things in a very, very small amount. So those are kind of our three main ways of posing. The last way is simply by using store-bought poses for your character, and if you're using smart content, you're going to see those in here. You are going to want to check that filter by context is turned on so that you're using poses for the correct type of character, but the poses will be under poses there, and then you can filter them by function, by region, which means by the area of the body, full body, lower body, partial body, upper body's there as well. And then you can go by function and you can choose the different functions here. Now these are only going to appear as and when there is a pose pack with sufficient metadata in there. So for example, standing will only appear when you have poses that are classed as standing. So if you look at your smart content filters and you don't see as many as this, don't be upset, don't be overwhelmed. It just means that you haven't currently got any poses on your database that fulfill the metadata requirements to have that. You also have the opportunity to use expressions, which are basically just poses for the face, and as you can see there's a buttload of options there, and then that gives you to choose from. And to operate those, all you have to do is I'll just choose a random one. All you have to do is double click on the pose that you want while the character is selected, and then your character will adopt the pose. Now I've chosen a pose deliberately here that doesn't have the hands near to the body so that we're not going to get any clipping there. If I were to find a pose that did have the character touching his hips or touching another part of his body, let's try like a folded arms one, which is a notoriously difficult pose to pull off. If we zoom in, you might find, in this case I think we've actually got lucky, that their contact with the body, as you can see there, because this was for a character with a different set of proportions, his arms aren't actually touching his hands, and his hand isn't actually touching his side there either. So as you can see, there's still some fine tuning that needs to be done there, and really the best way to deal with this is just to get in there and have a play and figure out what bits and pieces, what joints affect what. Because what you'll find is in order to move the arm backwards, there are multiple options. You can move the shoulder, or you can move the upper arm. You can even move the chest upper if you want to make these poses fit as they're supposed to. So getting in there and having a play is really the best thing that you can do. Remember that there's nothing you can do by applying poses to characters that's going to break the character, unless you accidentally save the character preset, but I would highly recommend not doing that. Just load your characters into the scene using the methods that we've talked about before, and then apply different poses to them. Play with the puppeteer tool, play with all of the different options that are available to you, and see how you can get on. Alright, that was a nice and quick and easy one, guys. I hope you found it useful. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Stay tuned for more Daz Studio content, and I will see you in the next one. But until then, you take damn good care of yourselves, alright? Bye bye.